Hey everyone, welcome. If you're gearing up for your GCSE Edexcel Psychology Paper 2, you are in exactly the right place. Let's just dive straight into this revision explainer. Today, we're going to master research methods, specifically how psychologists actually choose their participants. And to make these concepts really stick, we're going to use a super simple, very visual analogy: a giant jar of sweets. All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the basics of sampling, then break down opportunity, random, stratified, and volunteer sampling before finishing up with a quick knowledge test to see what you've retained. Okay, part one, the basics of sampling, or as we're calling it, from jar to handful. Look, in psychology, we obviously can't test every single person in the world. It's like you can't eat the entire sweet shop at once, right? So we have to scale things down. Imagine the overarching group you want to study as a giant jar of brilliantly colored sweets. This represents your target population. In research, the target population is simply the big group you're actually interested in studying. So, for example, your target population might be all students in the UK. It's the big group you want your findings to actually apply to. Now, since you can't test literally all the students in the UK, you first need to pinpoint a sampling frame. This is a smaller, identifiable group that can represent the target population, like, say, picking a specific school in Wales, one in England, and one in Scotland. From that sampling frame, you draw your representative handful of sweets. That final handful, that's your sample. They are the actual real people who take part in your study. Moving on to part two, opportunity sampling, grabbing the closest sweets. So how exactly do we pick that handful? Well, the absolute easiest way is to just grab what's right in front of you. Opportunity sampling is quite literally grabbing the sweets closest to the top of the jar. You just recruit those who are easiest to access or most convenient at that exact time. If you're a psychology student running a quick study, an opportunity sample might just be you asking the friends sitting next to you in the common room to take part. As you can probably guess, this method has some pretty distinct pros and cons. On the plus side, it is incredibly cost-effective and really quick. It doesn't require any extensive planning or resources because you're just relying on groups that are already there. However, and this is a crucial point, it leans heavily toward bias. Because you're just grabbing whoever is closest, your sample tends to favor certain groups or locations. Therefore, due to its non-random nature, findings from an opportunity sample can't be easily generalized to the broader target population. It really hurts the external validity of your study. All right, part three, random sampling, the sweet lottery. Let's see how we can build a much fairer selection process. Imagine closing your eyes, reaching into a thoroughly mixed jar of numbered lottery balls, and just blindly grabbing 5. By doing this, you're ensuring that absolutely everyone in the target population has an equal chance of being selected. The researcher has zero influence over who gets picked. To do this properly in a real psychological study, you'd use what we call the lottery method. First, you gather a complete list of people from your target population. Next, you put all those names into a lottery barrel, or, a metaphorical hat, and select names purely at random. Alternatively, you can just give everyone in the target population a number and use a random number generator tool to pick your participants. This is a brilliant way to illustrate an unbiased method. Because everyone has an equal chance of selection, it seriously reduces participant variables, and you're way more likely to get a truly representative sample. But here is the catch for your exams. It totally relies on all the selected people actually agreeing to take part. If someone selected refuses, you have to replace them. And at that point, your sample is no longer perfectly random, meaning there's no absolute guarantee the final group will perfectly represent the target population. Next up, part 4, stratified sampling, or sorting by color. Now, this is a highly precise method that definitely requires a bit more effort up front, but the payoff for accuracy is huge. Think of this method as sorting your sweets by color before you do anything else. The population is divided into distinct groups. You want to figure out the exact percentages of each type in your whole jar, making sure that your final, smaller handful perfectly mirrors the proportions of the big jar. In psychology, we actually call these subgroups strata. You create these strata based on the specific characteristics you're looking at, like age, gender, or maybe ethnicity. You calculate the percentage that each subgroup represents in the broader target population. Then, you randomly select participants from each subgroup so your final sample exactly matches those original percentages. It's literally proportionate representation in action. The strengths here are honestly fantastic. This method makes your sample highly representative. It's especially useful if you have a really small subgroup in your population that might accidentally get missed if you just used simple random sampling. The limitations, though, are practical. It is very time-consuming to work out the exact frequency of each strata and match them up perfectly. Plus, just like random sampling, it can still suffer from sample error if your carefully selected participants refuse to participate. Moving right along to Part 5, volunteer sampling, when the sweets step forward. For this fourth and final method, we kind of need to shift our analogy away from passive sweets to actual humans taking initiative. Volunteer sampling, which is also known as a self-selected sample, is exactly what it sounds like. Participants respond to an advert, maybe a poster looking for volunteers for a gum health study, and they choose to join the study entirely of their own accord. They step forward themselves. Evaluating this method is absolutely crucial for Paper 2. On the positive side, it's a super easy way to gather participants, and it allows researchers to target specific samples easily just based on where they place the advert. Crucially, it totally sidesteps ethical hurdles regarding consent because participants aren't being pressured, they come to you willingly. But the fatal flaw is, once again, bias. Certain types of people, those with more free time or those highly interested in the topic, are far more inclined to volunteer. This means those who volunteer might not be truly representative of the general population. Plus, you literally have to sit around and wait for people to sign up. Finally, Part 6, test your knowledge. Let's do some exam prep. Okay, we've covered the 4 main techniques. Now, let's actually put this fresh knowledge to the test. Active recall is the absolute best way to make this stick for your GCSEs. We have 3 scenarios here. Study 1 involves identifying subgroups and randomly selecting from them. Study 2 involves placing student names in a container and drawing out 50. Study 3 involves putting up a notice in a common room asking for participants with an hour to spare. Pause the explainer for a second if you need to, identify the sampling method used in each, and try to think of one advantage for each. All right, let's see how you did. Study 1 is stratified sampling because it identifies subgroups first. Its major advantage is that it's highly representative. Study 2 is random sampling, specifically using the lottery method, which is brilliant because it's totally unbiased. And Study 3 is a super easy, highly ethical volunteer sample because participants are actively responding to a notice. So, the absolutely crucial point I want you to take away from this entire explainer is this fundamental rule. The ultimate goal of all these sampling methods is representation. If your sample perfectly mirrors your target population, you can confidently generalize your psychological findings to the wider world. As you prep for your exam, ask yourself, if you were designing the next groundbreaking psychology study, which method would you rely on to fill your sweet jar? Keep that in mind as you revise, and I'll see you in the next explainer.